every angle. This is Arise America.
Israel will delay Saturday's expected release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners until the release of the next hostage is guaranteed and without the humiliating ceremonies, according to a statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Hamas released 6 hostages from Gaza on Saturday, handing over in 2 public ceremonies and 1 private transfer, the final living captives in this phase, whom the warring sides agreed would be freed when the ceasefire began last month. The next release of the remains of 4 more hostages is expected next week. Israel has expected to release 620 Palestinian detainees, including 23 children, in return, but the exchange was delayed for more than 10 hours, with Israeli officials citing further security reviews. Hamas's media office early on Saturday accused Israel of violating the truce with the delay, casting some uncertainty over the precarious ceasefire deal. Well, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz joins us from London now to discuss more on the Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal and Netanyahu's pause on the release of hostages. Good to have you, Dr. Marek. What does this mean for the continuation of the ceasefire deal that is talking about Netanyahu's decision to pause the release of 620 Palestinians?
Well, there are 3 very important aspects here. Number 1, Netanyahu is quite correct in stating that the humiliating way in which Hamas is releasing hostages, Hamas has extracted every ounce of PR possible, getting credit not only for releasing hostages, but for the returning prisoners. However, Netanyahu has shown yet again that he cannot do PR. He is useless as soft power. He has once again succeeded, as he did during the long war, when Israel started as the victim and ended up as the accused of genocide, just as he's managed now to succeed in making Israel the guilty party to breaking or violating the ceasefire agreement. And therefore, the reason why he does this is because he somehow has failed, as his entire cabinet, as Israel, to extract any ounce of prestige from releasing prisoners or from getting back hostages in the outside world. And that is why, of course, it is so annoying for him. But what is fundamentally interesting in world terms is something else altogether. President Donald Trump has said nothing. Remember when Hamas ceased for a while the ceasefire agreement? Donald Trump threatened all hell would get let loose. He wanted all hostages released immediately. But when Israel does this, he says nothing. And this confirms yet again that Israel has now a very strong ally in Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump is a partisan supporter of Israel. But by the same token, he is no longer a mediator, no longer a leader of the world in any sense. He is simply a very strong ally. And as a result, he is, so to speak, created a vacuum that if the Arabs and the Muslims in the Gaza wanted an ally, then Russia is waiting in the wings. And so therefore here, a very severe mistake is being occurred by Donald Trump, which we hope will not impact upon the world, but it will probably strengthen Putin's position.
I like that you brought in Trump into this conversation. Now, do you agree that the state ceremonies for hostages should have been discussed as part of the deal beforehand? And it will be interesting to see what Trump has to say after the pause by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Quite right. The first question is, was this discussed? The answer is no. Hamas simply took full advantage of an oversight by Israel. Whoever's directing their PR has done a magnificent job, because Hamas has come back from the dead. They are on the television all the time. They've shown that Gaza is fighting on. They've shown that Hamas has not been defeated. It has been a double whammy for Israel, not only just the ceasefire and the hostages, but Hamas surviving. Number 2. You're quite right in saying we should wait for Donald Trump, but he has actually stated he is ready to support whatever action Israel wishes to carry out. And here is the worst aspect of it. America, which up till now has been taking a lead role in deciding things, is simply now a passive passenger on what President Netanyahu wants to do. And therefore, what is very important here is that America under Donald Trump is abdicating its position, which is a pity because America was a force for stability for so long.
So who would you say is breaching the ceasefire deal now? Would you say it's Hamas or Israel in your perspective?
Legally speaking, it is Israel. Because you see, there was no formal agreement about how the hostages should be handed over. Therefore, Hamas has done nothing illegal. Politically speaking, sure, they've gone that step too far, you could argue, in using each ceremony to tout their cause. But this is politics, and one expects politicians to seize any opportunity. Rather, it is the failure of Netanyahu to extract what he can out of this agreement. And he has been left looking very much like the passive recipient of what Hamas is doing. And this is his failure. Not by any means the first. I repeat, Donald Trump himself pointed out, and he was, as far as I know, the only one to have noticed this, because I noticed it myself, that Israel totally failed to put across its case for constantly missiling Gaza to the point where it's being accused of genocide, whereas it was Hamas who had first attacked Israel. And therefore, this points out yet again to Netanyahu's inability to control the situation in soft power terms.
Now, is there anything Trump can do to see the deal continue, considering his closeness to Netanyahu and his ongoing talks with the Arab nations, despite what Benjamin Netanyahu just did?
In fact, I don't think America is the important player anymore in this. It is rather Qatar and Egypt who have played a superb role as mediators. In fact, if they succeed in bringing Israel back online and getting phase 2 to be started, there's a Nobel Peace Prize to be won here, which apparently President Donald Trump has been angling for, but there's no chance he can win it now because of his partisan blank check support for Israel. Therefore, Donald Trump could do an awful lot, but he won't. And there is the pity, because America for so long has been the very important nation in all this, and now, frankly, is a backseat driver. A strong support for Israel, but then, so what? The real aspect of this is how to solve the dispute. And Donald Trump, apart from asking Israel to do the dirty work and throw the Gazans out of Gaza and hand over the Strip to him, has actually produced nothing of substance ever since his famous interjection that unless Hamas agreed to a phase 1 deal, there would be all hell let loose. And since then, I'm afraid the USA has been very much a second-place position compared to the mediators of Egypt and Qatar.
So what can the mediators do now? You know, we're still in stage 1 of that ceasefire deal, handing over hostages, all of that. What can the mediators do to ensure that this does not go into a trigger or a catastrophe at the end of the day, or a pause to the whole ceasefire deal?
A very good question, because you're quite right. There is the threat here that the whole peace agreement could collapse. What the mediators have to do is find out quite what Netanyahu has in mind. He says there should be no more ceremony, but what quite does that mean? It's not by any means clear. I mean, Hamas have to hand over at some point, so there will be people from Hamas there. And you could make out a case that perhaps they've gone too far in handing over on podiums or whatever the hostages, and therefore what the mediators could do is find out quite what Netanyahu has in mind, and that would be a huge step forward. Possibly they could arrive at some sort of compromise with Hamas as to how the handover is carried out. And this is, I think, the key point, is to speak to Netanyahu and try and find some way forward. They did a superb job previously when Hamas balked, if you, of course, was well known some time back, and they managed to clear that. The key to it is conversation, discussion, negotiation, and that Qatar and Egypt have done very well up till now.
So now we would like to see, if Hamas decides not to release the hostages as Israel demands, what impact could that have?
That would be fatal, but I don't think Hamas is going to do that. What is happening is Netanyahu is simply saying he wants it done, but he hasn't made clear how. Hamas, for its part, has not confirmed, but there was no need for them to confirm until Netanyahu made this unexpected demand. It's a clear moment for negotiators to find out Hamas's position above all Netanyahu's. There is middle ground here because Netanyahu has not stopped entirely. He has not backed out. And the key point is now to find out quite on what terms he'd be willing to return, negotiate with Hamas. I personally believe it's 2-1 on that Egypt and Qatar will find a way around this. But the key is negotiation, discussion, conversation.
Well, that's how far we can go. Thank you so much, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, for joining us from London.
Every angle. This is Arise America.